So I'm Brian Choi. I'm the managing partner and CEO of the Food Institute.
And I'm Sunny, CEO, co-founder of MenuData.
So let's get straight into it. Let's talk about trends. So back in January of earlier this year, we talked about 4 macro trends. So what do I mean by 4 macro trends? These are trends that we expect and are continuing to see impact food and beverage across food service, retail, and manufacturing. Just to go over them very quickly, on the bottom left, value consciousness, specialty premiumization, health and wellness 3.0, and sensorial global experiences. So these macro trends really haven't changed as we look at the back half of 2025, but they have evolved. So I wanted to start off on the state of the consumer. Consumers make up 2/3 of the global economy. And it's really important to understand the psychology or the psychographics of consumers today. This is a graph looking at one of the most recognized consumer sentiment index, the University of Michigan, which really represents how consumers feel about their own financial outlook, but also how they look at the US economy over the next 6 to 12 months. So as you can see from, in 2020, and that's the middle of the graph, the number was around 100. So 100 really represents that consumers are feeling good, they're feeling good about the economy, they're willing to spend, and not surprisingly, right in the middle of COVID, we saw a sharp downturn, down to the levels of around 45, around 40. We have since seen a small uptick since the pandemic, but now with the news about the tariffs, about geopolitical risk, we're still seeing that number around the 50 to 55 range. So I think the one takeaway from this is that consumers are still feeling stressed, right? And so if you're a manufacturer, if you're a food service operator, you have to understand where consumers are and adapt your strategy to where your consumers are today. This is another graph looking at the economic outlook. So this was a poll done by Ipsos. The question was, how would you describe the economic situation in the US, right? And this is the percentage of folks that felt very good or somewhat good about the economy. And in a similar way, consumers felt really good right up until the pandemic. We saw a slight, a sharp downturn, but we're still not to the level where we were back, during pre-pandemic times. I think this is one of the most important charts to understand if you're a manufacturer, if you're a retailer, if you're a food service operator. And this looks at the difference between food inflation and wage inflation. So the yellow bars represent food inflation. The blue bars represent food inflation. So you can see from the earlier March of 2021, we saw food inflation absolutely spike month over month over month over month. And the line graph really represents the cumulative effect of both the difference between food inflation and wage inflation. And what it basically shows is that the consumer still isn't back to where they were pre-pandemic, right? So it's one thing to say that from a consumer sentiment perspective, consumers aren't feeling that great, but now we're actually looking at the numbers, right? So basically what consumers are taking in net of some of the expenses that they have to face on a day-to-day basis, right? So I think it's important to really understand where consumers are today. The first macro trend we're going to delve deeper into is the economy's impact. And this is the impact that tariffs are having on consumers. So on the left-hand side, you'll see the snack category. Next to that is dairy. Next to that is meals from restaurants. And lastly, alcoholic beverages. So the two areas where we're seeing the minimal impact is on snacking and dairy. And why is that? In the American economy, we have quite a few number of snack manufacturers, right? And we also have large manufacturing ability in the dairy category. But the two areas that consumers are feeling the most impact on certain products is really from meals from restaurants and alcoholic beverages. We rely so much on ingredients. Restaurateurs rely so much from outside ingredients, regional flavors, regional ingredients. Consumers don't want to pay those higher prices, right? So, and same thing with alcohol, right? A lot of the big alcohol companies, they're from Europe, they're from Japan. tariffs are having an impact on consumer spending. This next one is looking at how consumers are expected to spend over the next 3 months on various categories. So not surprisingly, when you look at food, whether it's produce, whether it's meat, whether it's shelf stable, we're seeing those categories really not being impacted as much as other spending categories.
Yeah, so when, if we take a look deeper and take a look at the specialty food shopper, we actually ran a survey where we asked which of the following best describes your interest in food and cooking, and how price sensitive are you when buying specialty foods? And some of the key takeaways that we had is that experimentation is the new mainstream. So if you add up the first 2 bars, nearly half of the respondents actively experiment at home, and another 29.2% identify as foodies. So they're really looking at food as a creative endeavor rather than just a routine chore. Secondly, when taking a look at price sensitivity, shoppers are craving novelty but care about price. So if you add up the moderately interested in prices and extremely that will actually trade down, you have almost a 70% consumer base that says price really shapes their decisions. So basically they're willing to spend, but only when they see value. So when consumers are really thinking about where to shop, we actually asked them in the last 3 months, where do you purchase specialty foods? And we're kind of shocked by the first answer being farmers markets, right? It's really signaling that the consumer cares about fresh, minimally handled, often organic, kind of reinforcing that storytelling piece about sourcing and organic certifications. And it's also very interesting to see almost 40% sought out dedicated ethnic grocers like H Mart or 99 Ranch. 43% visited Trader Joe's, which is famous for globally inspired private label twists.
Yeah, and just wanted to emphasize that consumers, just based on some of the responses here, consumers they're seeking new flavors, new experiences, and that's where a lot of that Gen Z millennial crowd they want to explore, right? That's super important if you're a manufacturer, if you're a retailer, if you're in food service. You got to tap into that consumer interest in exploratory flavors.
And here we asked a question, around what are kind of what are the top following factors in order of importance, and we asked consumers to kind of rank them, right? So you can see price and value, product uniqueness, convenience, store experience, sustainability or ethical sourcing. And we found that price and value really tops the importance list with kind of the overall lowest rank score. So even specialty shoppers who actively seek unique items are still asking, is this worth it? Secondly, you're seeing product distinctiveness come in second, signaling like consumers are willing to trade up if an item feels exclusive. It has an origin story. Is it limited batch? Is it a hard to find flavor? And while factors like store atmosphere and sustainability matter, third is obviously convenience, right? You're seeing that with delivery, location. Is it like extended hours? So these are kind of the top priorities for specialty shoppers.
So talking about global flavors, right? So we spoke about how the consumer is being much more discerning of what they're consuming. So this could be in food service, this could be in CPG. They are hyper-focused on finding new, authentic flavors from various regions, right? It's interesting looking at the broader market. We've seen the market share of artisanal food, many of which have these global products, rise from 14% to 23% over the past 13 years.
So here, when we sort of asked, our panel, what global flavor regions are you most interested in trying this year? We saw kind of the usual suspects at top, Europe, Mediterranean cuisine, but then you're seeing interesting choices like Caribbean, Latin American, South Asian, East Asian, African, Middle Eastern. So it really seems like consumers want to experiment with global flavors, and there's no clear-cut winner. They're all incredibly close, and yeah.
I think this is one of the most interesting slides in our presentation, looking at what types of cuisines and products different demographic groups are focused on. So just looking at Gen Z, we were surprised to see that African food and flavors are at the top of the list, right? And this is not something that I expected, but you can see how different, when you look at Gen Z and millennials and Gen X and baby boomers, how different these demographic profiles are, right? So again, going back to the point of really understanding your target market, right? Whether you're a food service operator, whether you're a retailer or manufacturer, understand what your demographics want. And this is some of the data that Food Institute and MenuData, we work with companies to really understand their target markets and adapt the strategy based on where the consumer is at. All right, so the third macro trend is focused on health and wellness, right? So we mentioned at the beginning of the presentation, consumers are looking for cleaner ingredients. I don't think it's any surprise why plant-based, or how consumers view plant-based. They're sort of gravitating away from the ultra-processed, right? Even when you look at the Mondelez's and some of the CPG products, consumers don't want to see 20 different ingredients that they don't know how to pronounce or understand, right? Fewer ingredients, cleaner ingredients, this is a focus. 77% of consumers are seeking a healthier diet, right? That's over 200 million Americans, in the United States, right? So the barriers to a healthy diet, they're still there, it's still at a higher price point, but overall, the ship is moving towards healthier, cleaner ingredients, and we don't see that trend stopping anytime soon.
Here we actually did a very interesting analysis where we actually queried all of the different health terms that are showing up in retail. And then we're analyzing it from 2024 to 2025 and seeing how many new SKUs have been added and what does sort of that price difference look like. And what we saw was incredibly interesting, right? So you're seeing terms like grass-fed, avocado oil, and ghee growing extremely rapidly, almost 14 to 40%. But you're also seeing long-established, better-for-you ingredients like Greek yogurt, almond flour, still almost showing double-digit gains. So we don't really see this trend stopping, and it seems like while there is new products coming out in the market, consumers are willing to pay a little bit more for it. Also here, we're really showing the distribution of several regional and national retailers ranked by growth in healthy ingredient categories. And this is really interesting because it really highlights how localized these trends are. So, Sprouts is in Northern California, that sort of consumer base is going to be very, very different than someone in the Midwest, right? A retailer in the Midwest. And it goes to show you that depending on where you are in the US, you might see a whole different product assortment or product mix.
So the name of the game in this back half of 2025 is what we call purposeful premium. So in other words, it's not just for the upper demographic or even sort of the mainstream America. They want that elevated experience, right? They're seeking something that it's not just for the body, but helps them with their emotions. Purposeful indulgence is another way to put it. So this rise in premium snacks, it's growing at a 4 to 5% CAGR, right? Compound annual growth rate. And we don't expect that to change. And so, one of the great examples, Dubai chocolate. Has anyone tried Dubai chocolate? Okay, there you go. So that trend actually went wildfire 6-12 months ago. I had a chance to actually taste the real thing in Dubai as I was speaking at a conference. And I was just walking the aisles, the past couple of days. I probably saw 2 to 3 different manufacturers in a period of a span of 5 minutes. This trend is continuing. So consumers want something unique, right? The taste profile is different. And I think when we were in Dubai, my wife and I were in Dubai, we probably spent about $15 per chocolate bar for Dubai chocolate. This is US dollars, right? And there was actually a line. There was the one manufacturer in Dubai basically sold out by 11 o'clock in the morning. So you actually had to order it through a delivery app just to get your hands on it, right? This trend, consumers are seeking that type of experience.
And here, we're sort of asking consumers, which artisanal product categories have you purchased in the last month? Is it bakery, pastries, cheese, charcuterie, chocolate, condiments, craft beverages, plant-based foods, pickled or fermented products? And what we saw was this interest in comfort and indulgence, with bakery, charcuterie, and chocolate kind of leading the way. We're also seeing that increase, that uptick in condiments and hot sauces, right? So there's this stat, 93% of consumers reporting that they enjoy hot sauce, and amongst millennials and Gen Z, 1 in 4 say that they actually pack their own condiments when they go out to eat at a restaurant, which is pretty interesting. Yeah, here we're asking consumers what attributes most influence your decision to buy an artisanal product. And you can see the first response is just so much higher than the rest, right? So it really, really matters to have a unique flavor profile when you're bringing a new product to market. Underneath it, you're seeing organic, dietary benefits, local origin, but it's also interesting to see the sharp decline around brand story, small batch, and packaging.
This is a year to be bold, right? The old playbook is not working. I'm a financial analyst. I worked on Wall Street for 10 years. I was analyzing SEC statements and public filings for some of the leading food and beverage companies in the world, right? When I look at their financial statements today, they're actually in decline, right? And it's because they're utilizing the same old tactics, and they're packaging for innovation in a way that does not resonate with consumers, right? Just changing the packaging or changing one ingredient really isn't going to move the needle. This is a year of the challenger brands, and again, it's not about size of company, right? If you have a large food service operation or a manufacturer, you need to look at where your consumers are and find bold flavors. Consumers are not resonating with the same old, right? And so again, looking at the top, what is the one attribute that is most important for the specialty food industry? It's unique flavor profile.